Sydney, Australia, the main gateway for the country's growing inbound tourism industry. It's an industry that sees 9 million tourist visits a year. Of these, the largest group, 1.4 million, is from China. The Chinese spend over $11 billion annually. But with Chinese visitor numbers increasing by 10% a year, and these visitors on the lookout for authentic experiences, how well is the Australian service industry placed to meet the growing number of arrivals? And what does the future hold?
What are they looking for? They're looking for experiences around food, they're looking for experiences around wildlife, they want to stay in quality accommodation, and they want to be connected back to their friends in China. We think that by 2025, 2026, there could be as many as 3 million Chinese visitors. Conservatively out by 2030, it could be as many as 6 million.
We're here at Star Entertainment Group's flagship hotel, The Darling in Sydney, to find out more about the opportunity the projected inbound tourism numbers from China offer. Matt Beckier is MD and CEO.
So we think this is an intergenerational opportunity for us to say Australia has all of the attributes that the international, particularly the Asian guest is looking for. So we want to tap into this opportunity, not by taking our offer to China. We want to be here in Australia and welcome the guests and have the best experience for them.
That experience starts early, before visitors board airlines in China.
We make sure that they get inspired before they come, that there is a desire for them to come to our property. And when they're on property, we have a lot of Chinese-friendly programs rolled out to ensure that they're looked after here on property. And after they go back, we engage with them through the comments that they make to us, through the chat that they provide to us at the back end of our WeChat account.
We need to be very relevant in our local markets to be authentic. Our international guests don't want to experience something that is fabricated. To a week later into Chinese Lunar New Year with a totally different theming, different food, different customer service experiences.
A lot of our staff are bilingual, and we make sure that our guests can reach out to them very easily. They wear badges to say that they are not only language capable, but their culture is mutual to our Chinese customers.
You know that Sydney is our flagship property, and every year we have about 11 million visitors that come to our property. Now, the one thing that is holding us back is hotel rooms. And so for the last 4 years, we've been planning to get a Ritz-Carlton tower onto our site. That tower will be a 60-story development with a Ritz-Carlton and a public bar on top that gives you unbelievable views over the city all the way out to the heads.
Star Entertainment Group has embarked on a building program that will have a significant impact on the Australian tourism industry. Sydney is just the start. Major developments are underway across 3 cities, Sydney, Brisbane and the Gold Coast, all with an eye on the Chinese visitors' experience.
So total investment that we have currently queued up is in the range of about $6 billion. So that's a very material amount of investment that we're putting forward. The only way we can deliver that is through the partnership and the capital light investment model that we are pursuing. Queen's Wharf, we're in partnership with 2 eminent Hong Kong firms, Chow Tai Fook and Far East. That helps us to deliver this big platform.
But when you look at the presence of Far East and Chow Tai Fook in the region, they're a much admired and much respected 2 companies. Chow Tai Fook, of course, is a very, very large conglomerate. Their hotel chain is the Rosewood, a 5 to 6 star hotel chain. And then Far East, which has operated in Australia for over 20 years, they know the construction and development business backwards. They know it better than us.
Queen's Wharf is the big development opportunity for us. You're looking at a site that's about 10 hectares in the middle of the city centre in Brisbane. And we've been given the opportunity to almost reshape the city centre. So with Queen's Wharf, we're looking currently at 4 new hotels, a Ritz-Carlton, a Dorset, a Rosewood Hotel and one of our own. A development that will have over 1,100 hotel rooms. So it is quite a city-shaping development, and it speaks to the attraction of Brisbane that really hasn't been fully captured. So from a tourism point of view, in Brisbane in 2020, there's a second runway that opens up in Brisbane. That will make it the biggest airport in Australia. It has more capacity than Singapore or Hong Kong. So that will become the gateway for international tourism into Australia.
By partnering with two significant Chinese companies, Star found the game changer it was looking for. Chairman John O'Neill explains.
The reality is that the relationships with Far East and Chow Tai Fook at a personal level are fundamentally important. And then that just is extraordinarily valuable. It binds the relationship. It makes it's more than money, it's more than capital, it's friendship.
In the Gold Coast, we currently have 2 hotels and about 20 bars and restaurants. We are in the early stages of building a 3rd hotel, and we've just announced a 4th tower with an additional hotel that rounds out the experience in the Gold Coast. So it's a very exciting development that will make it as big as, for example, Marina Bay in Singapore. So it's a very, very substantial contribution to the tourism infrastructure in this country.
If we're building assets that have the right appeal and attraction for Chinese visitation, and Australia generally is playing its role, so it's not just us. So it's airlines, it's airports, it's the whole pipeline that play a role in inbound tourism. We're going to be the beneficiaries of that.
The story doesn't end there. Star's significant investment strategy and emphasis on delivering unique experiences for Chinese tourists has a flow-on effect into the Australian economy as well, ensuring a win-win outcome for tourism operators and other stakeholders alike.
What I'm also excited about, though, is that we've now tapped in and shifted our industry away from groups and into the independent traveller. And the independent traveller, as I said before, is so important because they're more resilient, they spend more, they disperse more within Australia. Yes, they are more demanding and more sophisticated than our industry probably gives them credit from time to time, but they are exactly the type of traveller that we want.
Melbourne, home to Australia's most well-known sporting event and a major draw card for the independent Chinese traveller looking for experiences.
So the Australian Open is incredibly important to how we present ourselves to the world. But it's not just the Australian Open, we have other amazing events. We have the Grand Prix, we have the Melbourne Cup, we have the Boxing Day Test. But the Australian Open is the most well-known, and it is hugely important because for 2 weeks of the year, the world is focused on Melbourne. Because it's summer and because the views and the imagery we get, it really does create that bucket list experience that all Chinese and all Asian visitors go, I really have to get to Melbourne.
I'd like to say we planned the AO around the Chinese New Year, so I'm going to say it. We've always done it the last 125 years, but it really works well for us.
But what is also important is the partnerships that we've developed in China, and the partnership that we've developed with China's largest online travel agency, Ctrip, gives us that huge opportunity, and that's why you're seeing an increase in Chinese visitors to the Australian Open each year.
Australia Open is holding on the central location in Melbourne, so it's very convenient for all the travellers to travel around. And don't forget Australia Open as the leading sports and entertainment events and festivals. It really creates a very multi-experience enjoyment. So it's not only for tennis fans, again, as I mentioned, it's actually suitable for everybody.
And in Victoria, we really have some amazing offerings. We have obviously the Great Ocean Road and the 12 Apostles, which is actually one of the most visited sites in Australia. On top of that, we have Mornington Peninsula. So we have this amazing array. And as I said, the beauty of it is amazing different experiences all within 1 to 2 hours of the city.
We're here on the Mornington Peninsula to find out firsthand how Chinese tourism is impacting the peninsula region.
The change in the nature of tourism, which is moving from group tourism into visiting friends and relatives, and the FIT, the free and independent traveller market, is very important for the Mornington Peninsula. And we're finding that the Chinese market, more so than most other Asian markets, are very relaxed about hiring a car. In a car, you can visit 4 or 5 different things in one day and really feel like you've been to the bay, to the ocean, to the wineries, to the hot springs, to dolphin swimming, fishing, golf. So many activities are all here in the one location. Our hilltop pool, this amphitheatre, our fire and ice, our clay ridge. All of these experiences have been really designed with the idea of, is this photographable, and is it memorable, and is it transformational? And if we can answer all of those three things, then we feel like we've got a product which they will sell for us because they love the experience.
30 minutes down the road is Endota, the first spa on the Mornington Peninsula. It was established 19 years ago by CEO Melanie Gleeson, a pioneer of the wellbeing movement in Australia. The company now markets its products in China and has plans underway to become a voice for Chinese women with educational content on WeChat.
The Chinese women and Chinese consumers are looking for a brand that they can trust, a brand that is Australian made, a brand that uses organic and certified ingredients, and a brand that they feel comfortable using on their families as well as themselves.
For us to want to be able to sell into the Chinese market, they really need to experience our spas. So we really want to promote that Australian experience. So if we want them to come here and visit the sites, jump in a hot air balloon, have an Endota spa treatment, that's when they get the full understanding of what the Endota brand is about, the wellness aspect, the self-care aspect, and I think that is going to be key in terms of how we move forward.
20 minutes away, visitors discover something different, a family-friendly farm, food and wine experience.
When we look at the people that visit Green Olive at Red Hill, we have the self-drive, people who are independent travellers, love to do it. We have a very big group of people who come who children are studying in Melbourne, students, and they come down and they want to bring their family down. They want to share the Green Olive because they've been here and they want to bring their family down and see it. And then, the tour groups are still, but the Chinese market, I find it amazing. They go to Tullamarine, they jump off the plane, jump in a car and they drive. They love to explore.
The natural experience that attracts visitors to the Mornington Peninsula is closely linked to its cool climate and rich volcanic soils, both ideal for growing quality food and wine.
Well, have a look at it. This is the most amazing place to live. The food and the wine, the variety of produce we've got, oil, vinegar, cherries, fruit, vegetables, it just goes on and on. Whatever is in season is what we put on our menus. So for a restaurant, it's a really easy gig because we've got so much local produce.
We're here at Red Hill Vineyard to find out about the experience of creating and tasting some of the peninsula's finest boutique wines. Mornington wines are gaining recognition in China, where consumer preferences are moving to the premium end of the market. Luke Curry, winemaker and viticulturist at Red Hill Vineyard, explains his approach.
The thing that I find exciting is to see the character of the vineyard in the wine. You can see it through all the stages, the way the vine grows, the wind that it sees, and even the way it handles weather patterns and things like that. You get a sense of the resilience of places. And when you taste the fruit, there'll be a shape or a character of the fruit that'll hopefully transfer to the wine. So it's, for me, I think the best thing about the wine making is when you see the vineyard character translated into the wine with purity, and it takes you back to that place when you drink it.
Now, the whole tourism industry is actually about storytelling. The more that we can engage with an experience, the more that we're going to be able to attract the Chinese market.
If you think about what tourism does, it creates trust, it creates connectivity, and that is so important, not just in China, but in Asia as a culture generally. And what we've seen is that in corresponding sectors, when the increase in Chinese visitation to Australia has been 20-30%, if you take wine for an example, wine exports in 2016 to China, according to LEK, increased by 40% the following year.
Chinese tourists sampling wine while visiting Australia and taking that knowledge back with them to spread the word is only part of the story. The inroads made by Australian wine into China are on a much larger scale.
There's about 60 million cases going into China now. It is, one of the interesting things, though, is it's much more premium than a lot of people expect. Particularly Australian wine. Australia, out of the top 5 importers, Australia is the biggest per litre rate. Much bigger than France, much bigger than the other old world countries that are in that top 5 group. So I think the potential here is huge because we've only really scratched the surface.
The popularity of Australian wine with Chinese consumers is driven by a number of factors.
I think that it starts from a fundamental perception of Australia being pure, clean, fresh, quality control, and the diversity of wines we can produce from sweet, white, fruity, heavy red, light red. It's just incredible. And innovative as well, which means we're a lot more creative. And then all the funding side with the governments, both sides, has all just had it all gone into the pot at the same time. When you add them all together, you're sitting on $1 billion worth of business and a value per litre which is second to none.
There is definitely a changing taste in China, without absolute question of that. I mean, in the early days, the people who really got behind the fine wine side of things were very rich, wealthy people who all went for luxury European products, which included wine, particularly first growth wines from Bordeaux. But that's all changed as the Chinese have become better travelled, tasting more different wines, engaging with their own wine shows, different ways of talking to each other on the social media.
We're here at the 2019 China Food and Drinks Fair in Chengdu to discover more about the penetration of Australian New World wine into China.
It's a thriving community full of Chinese people, keen to meet the winemaker, to talk to them, even through interpreters. All we see is just positive forward momentum.
China is now home to a new generation of wine consumers. They are young, well-educated and well-travelled with a hunger for knowledge. James Halliday, revered wine critic and Australian wine expert, highlights the unique challenges the Chinese wine market poses for Australian wines.
It's the first major market that we've had where English is not the first language. It's the first market that we've had where wine and food wasn't understood as a whole natural thing to go together.
James Halliday is attending the show to hold tasting masterclasses and promote the Chinese edition of the Halliday Wine Companion. Over the past 40 years, Australians have fondly called it the Bible of Australian wine.
Well, the Halliday Companion is part book, part online. So if we just talk about in the book, you get tasting notes and ratings and prices. You take those together, it's about 6,000. If you add the other 3,500 that are tasted in each year, you're up around 9,500 as the number of wines tasted each year for the companion in whatever form that may end up being.
So last year we launched the first Chinese version of Halliday Wine Companion. So we are very excited. Last November, we officially released this book, and the sales is fantastic. But this year, we are more excited. Why I say that? Actually, it's the end of this month. We are launching the digital version. That is mini program. Because in China, everyone using mobile phone. We live with the online platform. So this is the first initiative. We want to reaching broader audience from trade people to consumers.
There's a lot of marketing going on here in China, but really it misses the essential ingredient, which is tasting and understanding what you should be looking for.
Halliday's first Chinese edition plans to tap into the exponential growth of the wine culture in China. Chinese cities now offer a wine, spirit and education trust course, educational seminars on wine, and tasting and wine education classes. The number of sommeliers and wine bars is also on the rise. In this environment, consumers are eager to develop their knowledge of wine, varieties and the winemaking process, as well as bottled experiences.
I think there's a lot of interest in family-style boutique storied wineries, and it plays a little bit to the confidence issue we were talking about, because if people meet the owner and it's limited, small production, they love telling that story, and particularly if they go and visit, because they can go back to their events and say, well, when I met Mr. who's the owner of they feel much more confident.
It's my belief that the great wines of the world are produced when there's a connection between the vineyard and the winery. There's not one without the other. And as I said before, the reason why I get involved in the vineyard management is so that I can understand not only that vineyard, but that season.
Today, the varieties of Australian wine consumed in China are changing. A market traditionally dominated by heavy Barossa Shiraz is now transforming to include a much broader spectrum of taste, including Pinot Noir, Chardonnay and Rosé.
Women are probably more interested in wine in China than men, and in fact most of the wine education forums are heavily skewed towards women.
The future for really premium Australian wines is here. I mean, it's not even future. The Penfolds or Treasury Wine Estate has demonstrated that really in so many different ways, and they're doing a great job for Australia.
Australia is also helping China to further develop its own wine industry. We've travelled back to Australia to a winery near the country town of Shepparton. Here at the University of Melbourne's Dookie campus, Chinese students are immersing themselves in the full wine experience with an eye on the future. Lecturer Chris Barnes has a view that provides food for thought for an industry experiencing unprecedented growth.
Because one of the things the Chinese want to do is not just learn about wine, they want to make it themselves. And they are in a process of planting vast amounts of vineyard. They're setting up large wine producing businesses. They're looking at consultants from Australia and from Europe to help them out with that. But one of the things they want to learn from us is the generational nature of wine, in the sense of a mature vineyard, 20, 30 years, and make that wine over a couple of decades before you really get it and before you're able to do it. Our challenge is to be able to convince the Chinese market as exporters, convince them that we produce not just everyday good value red wine, but we produce great quality red wine that is of world standard, that is going to be better than what they're able to produce on a day-to-day basis. And that's our challenge in the next decade or two.
This challenge and the sharing of wine knowledge with China are not incompatible. While Australia is helping China establish its own high-volume wine production industry, Australian winemakers are positioning Australian wine as premium and handcrafted to meet growing demand. It's a strategy designed to ensure China's love affair with the Australian wine drinking experience will continue on into the future.